This is a giant Asian mantis. And yes, it's exactly as cool as it looks. If you've never seen one before, they're one of the biggest mantis species you can keep as a pet, and they can reach up to 4 inches long. They're incredible hunters that usually ambush their prey, but can also switch to being a stealthy stalker when they need to. So naturally, I just had to get one. But I didn't want to just keep it in some plain basic enclosure and call it a day. No, I wanted a setup that actually mimicked nature. If I'm keeping something this cool, it deserved an enclosure that was just as cool. So I built it a fully bioactive terrarium, and honestly, this might be my most ambitious build so far. We're talking a custom background on all 3 sides, live plants, a giant climbing centerpiece, and even a day and night lighting cycle. And today, I'm going to walk you through the entire process from start to finish. If you're new here, I keep exotic invertebrates and document everything on camera. We're talking animals such as the giant water bug, magic potion isopods, and now this giant Asian mantis. So if that's something you're into, make sure to subscribe because we've got a lot more coming. Enough of the intro, let's build this terrarium. Starting with the tank, it's 12 by 12 by 18 inches and it's a glass tank from Zoomed. This one was a kit, but I ended up not using any of the stuff inside, so I'll just save it for a future build. I chose this size specifically because as a general rule, when trying to find a tank size for your mantis, the height has to be at least 3 times its max size, and the length and width have to be at least 2 times its max size. And since the giant Asian mantis grows up to about 4 inches, this is plenty of space for it. This tank also came with a metal mesh on top, but it is actually harmful for the mantis since it can cut their feet, so I did end up changing it later on. Starting off, we got the custom background. This part took the longest because I had to wait for the silicone to cure and make sure it wasn't off-gassing anymore, as it's pretty harmful for your mantis and the plants. This is the cork bark I used for the background. This is the expanding foam I used. It's called Great Stuff Pond and Stone. It's basically what everybody recommends. This is just some aquarium safe silicone. And now for the background. First, I put a thin layer of silicone so the expanding foam has something to hold on to. And then I used the expanding foam to make what would be the walls of the terrarium. I did it in circles just so it creates a bit of randomness to it and it's not just straight lines. Then I placed a few cork bark pieces, as well as this cool stick that I had. And then all I had to do was wait for the expanding foam to cure so I could start on the next side. And while I waited, I got a nice little package. So let's do an unboxing, shall we? I opened it up and wrapped in some newspapers was a little sauce cup. And upon looking inside, there were actually 2 little babies. Mind you, I only ordered 1, so I guess this is normal when shipping mantises, which I really appreciate. But overall, both of them looked healthy besides being hungry and thirsty. And knowing that they were hungry, I quickly moved them to their separate containers to avoid them eating each other. These sauce cups were only temporary until I got a bigger one for them. I sprayed a little bit of water in it and immediately they got to drinking. These guys are really cool looking but also a little bit creepy at the same time. They also molted during shipping, which is pretty crazy. So I just wrote down the approximate day they could have molted just to keep track. And I believe they molt around 10 times before reaching adulthood. And now that the back is fully cured, we can move on to one of the sides now. It's the same exact process as the back one, so while we wait for that to cure, I got some food for my mantises, as well as bigger containers so they could actually move around. Again, I kept it pretty simple with just a paper towel, some water, and a stick. And that was enough for them. Since they are still very small and delicate, you don't want to feed them anything super big. So what did I get? Some flightless fruit flies. These guys are small enough to fit in the mantis's claws as well as not fight back. Since their abdomens were pretty flat, I put a few in each of their containers. This one managed to catch one after chasing it all around the container. And I can't believe this happened, but one of the mantises actually fed from my hand. Watching these guys eat is so cool and fascinating to watch. And now that they were full, it's time to finish the last side of the tank. It's gonna be the same process as the other 2 sides, and now that that's done, we can finally start molding it how we want it to look. First, I'll take a blade and start shaving it down. That way it's not so round and unnatural, and also so the silicone can actually stick to the foam. This actually took an annoyingly long time to do, but in the end I really liked how it turned out. Next, we're gonna add substrate to the walls so it actually looks natural, and for this I used cocoa peat and sphagnum moss. Looking back on it though, I should have chopped up the moss more so that it's not in big pieces. So to get the substrate to stick, I just put a thin layer of silicone all on the expanding foam that I just shaved down. Again, I had to wait for each side to finish curing so that the substrate didn't just fall off. And after 3 days, this is the final result. This was my first time doing a custom background. What do you guys think? There were a bit of spots where you could still see a bit of expanding foam, but unless you looked really carefully, you weren't gonna notice it. But for some of the bigger ones, I glued some moss into the holes just to cover it up. And now that that was done, it was time to replace the metal mesh on the top of the tank. Like I said earlier, the metal mesh can actually cut the feet of the mantis, so I kept a gap and added window mesh after it. And with that done, the hard part of the tank was officially over. And of course, I made sure to feed my mantises every few days while waiting for the sides of the tank. And after letting the silicone off gas for a few weeks, it was finally time to move it into my room. And for part 2, we got the substrate. First, we need a drainage layer. This allows excess water to go to the bottom, preventing the substrate from being constantly soaked. So for this, I used some leca clay pebbles, and I just added a few inches to the bottom. And for the actual substrate, I used ABG mix. This is a mixture of charcoal, sphagnum moss, pine bark, tree fern, and peat. Adding the substrate was probably the easiest part, and now it's time to add the plants. In total, I have 9 plants. They are sheet moss, mood moss, oak leaf creeping fig, air plants, bromeliad, white nerve plant, jade pothos, red nerve plant, and compact Boston fern. I wanted to work from back to front, so I started off with the bigger plants. I decided to put the Boston fern in the back left corner, and then I dug out a spot right next to it for the pothos, and the bromeliad went in front of the pothos. This is 1 out of 3 of the creeping fig. This is going to scale the walls so it's not so bare. I put 1 on the back, 1 on the left, and then 1 in the middle where my climbing piece would be. And then on both sides I added the red and white nerve plants. They look like they're dying right now, but they're known to be pretty dramatic and they'll bounce back. I gave it a quick mist before adding the air plants. I didn't do this on purpose, but all of them had a really nice place where they could sit. And now it's time for the moss. The moss will help bring it together by getting rid of empty spots and making it look more cohesive and natural. I started off with the sheet moss in this big empty spot, and then I added some mood moss on the right side where there was this giant gap between the substrate and the background. There was also this nice ledge in the back where I could put a piece of sheet moss. And then I just filled up the rest of the gaps and also placed some moss on some ledges if there were any. I wasn't really planning anywhere specific where it should go. I just put it where I thought it would look natural and make it look better. And after I finished, I just gave the moss a quick mist so it's not dry. And for my first time ever planting a land tank, I think it turned out decent. What do you guys think? Comment down below. And with every bioactive terrarium, one thing you will always need is springtails. Think of these guys like the recyclers of the terrarium. They consume mold and decaying plant matter. They're really tiny, so you're not gonna see them around the tank, but just know they're super important. And then we add leaf litter. The leaves serve a few important roles in the terrarium. The first one is to make it look natural. The second is that it serves as a shelter and food source for the springtails. And then 3, once it's broken down by them, it reintroduces nutrients to the soil, which help the plants. Now that the plants are all in, it's time to leave them alone for a bit and let them settle in. And then 3 days later, one of my mantises molted. If the site I ordered from is correct and they sent me an L2 mantis, then this right here is now an L4 mantis. Look at the size difference between the L4 and the L3. And now for the last part of the terrarium, the climbing centerpiece. If you didn't already know, mantises love to climb, and they need a way to get to a high vantage point so they could hang upside down. I didn't have much room left, but I thought these 2 sticks were gonna be perfect for it. When I first started this terrarium, I pictured the climbing piece as a barren tree in the middle of all this lush nature and plants. I thought it would be really cool, so I started thinking of how I was going to glue these together. It honestly didn't take me long to figure out how I wanted the tree to look, and once I figured out the position, I used the super glue and tissue trick to stick them together. For this specific trick, normally you're supposed to use the liquid super glue, but I only had the gel glue. But I managed to make it work somehow. And obviously I didn't want the tissue paper to show, so I glued a bunch of substrate onto the seams to make it look more natural. I was afraid it was gonna look a bit weird, but I think it turned out just fine. I waited a full day for it to cure and off gas, and once it was done, it was time to place it in the tank. The custom tree fit perfectly, and it was time to cover it back up. I replaced the creeping fig so it grew up the tree, and this is how it turned out. I also glued these tiny twigs just to give it a bit more climbing space. And with that, the terrarium was finally over. I was really happy with how it turned out, and I was pretty proud of myself for all the hard work I put into this. And for the moment we've all been waiting for, it was time for the mantis to move into its new home. No more plastic cups for him. It's gonna be an all-natural terrarium this time. And before I put him in, I gave him some food, and then finally, it was moving time. Moving into a new environment for a mantis can be pretty stressful, so I didn't want to push him in too much. I just gave him a few love taps to get him in. It took him a few hours to soak in his new environment, but eventually he found his way to the top just like I knew he would. Welcome to your new home, buddy. I hope you enjoy. And now that they're in the tank, that concludes my video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I worked really hard on this. It's been a good few months, and again, I'm really happy with how this turned out. Let me know your thoughts down below, and if you liked it, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss a new video. I promise to make a part 2 for you guys, like an update video. I do got another project that I'm working on, so stay tuned for that one too. If you made it to the end, genuinely, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.